นะครับ We've got quite a heavy list to go through today, or a heavy agenda.
Chair, do you mind if I interrupt and do some housekeeping?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Good morning, members and officers. Can I just do some housekeeping announcements, please, for the meeting, so that everybody present and those who are viewing on live stream at home can actually know what's going to happen today. The meeting is being live streamed on the internet and recorded for archive purposes. Would all present, except for the members of the committee, please switch their cameras and microphones off until they are called by the chairman to speak? However, for members of the committee, would you also switch your microphones off until called by the chairman to speak, but please remain on camera if you so wish to do so. Should you wish to speak, during the meeting, would you please use the raise your hand function, or if that's not working, or if you find it easier, just raise your hand on screen if you prefer to do that. And in relation to the chat facility, the chair would prefer that this is limited to use only if there are any issues with your functions or any connection issues at all. And that if you have any further connection issues, that you contact the Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any apologies for absence?
Chair, I have apologies from Councillor Gray and Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September, I've read through those. I can't find anything incorrect. Is anybody? Are we all happy that that's a true record?
May I come in, please?
Yes, Mr. Alexander.
On 281, at the bottom of the page 328, this relates to an item that I raised at the last meeting together with Mrs. Tinsley. I understand the rationale in waiting for the training for members of the Standards Committee to be coordinated with the new intake of elected members following the election next year. But I wondered if, against the background of the Penn report, if there was anything more ambitious that could be done in terms of training for members of the Standards Committee in the interim. Thank you.
Okay. Debbie, do you want to deal with that? Although we are strictly dealing with the minutes, but do you want to deal with that?
Yes, thank you. I think certainly I'm more than happy to liaise with colleagues within our equalities team to arrange some interim training, and then obviously to have a further session programme of training as indicated in the minutes. So yes, I'll certainly explore that with colleagues.
Yeah. Mr. Alexander, is there anything specific that you think we need training on? Because if there is, perhaps you could address those to Debbie, and then they can be considered.
Yes, of course, happy to.
Okay, good. Other than that, can I sign the minutes as being an accurate record? Take your silence as being agreed. Thank you. Applications for dispensation. Did you say Councillor Driscoll was going to be present?
He is present.
He is present. So we'll deal with his application first.
Chair?
Yes?
Chair, I think you have to do declarations of interest.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I've missed that one. Yes, any declarations of interest?
Chair, I've taken advice on item 9 through to 12 on whether I should declare an interest, and I've decided that I don't need to. The advice was extremely good from the monitoring officer, and I feel that my relationship with the issue is not close enough for me to need to declare an interest.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else wants to comment? No other declarations of issues. Sorry, I didn't deal with that. Yes. So the first application is from Councillor Vince Driscoll. Debbie, do you want to just remind us of our duties here and his application?
Yes, thank you. So this is an application from Councillor Driscoll, a Vale of Glamorgan councillor, and it's an application to speak and vote on issues involving Holton Road, Barry. As indicated in Councillor Driscoll's application, he's advised that he's a director of a company that owns and rents out properties or premises, retail premises on Holton Road. So he's acknowledged, obviously, there is a personal and prejudicial interest. Within the body of the application, he's indicated why he feels that he should be given a dispensation to speak and vote, and he's citing grounds D and F under the regulations. That firstly, under ground D, that by virtue of him participating, because of his background, that it would not damage public confidence, and secondly, ground F, that it's justified by virtue of his particular role. To clarify, with regards to the term of the application, Councillor Driscoll has indicated that he would seek for the application to be longer than just one meeting, and I think, and Councillor Driscoll can confirm this when he speaks, that he'd be looking for the dispensation up until the May 2022 elections, which is usual. What I would say to committee is, and certainly Councillor Driscoll and Councillor Robinson will be aware of this, that albeit a member has a personal and prejudicial interest, there are certain exceptions when a member can still speak at committee, and that is in regard to committees where members of the public also have an opportunity to speak. So that's in particular with regards to scrutiny committees and planning committees. So just for the benefit of Councillor Cuddy and the independent members, that means that even if a member has a personal and prejudicial interest, which Councillor Driscoll is acknowledging by virtue of his application, that in those circumstances when the public can speak, that he would be able to also speak, provided he declares his personal prejudicial interest, the nature of the interest, and then after he has spoken, leaves the meeting room. So there are those exceptions which are permitted by virtue of the Members' Code of Conduct. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And the last point I wanted to raise is that when you are considering this application, the test to be applied is to have regard to whether by maintaining the restrictions imposed by the code. So of course the code would not permit Councillor Driscoll to vote on any such matters and only speak in those limited circumstances, but of course by permitting him to speak it would give him extended permissions, but the test is whether by preventing him speak it is in the public interest as opposed to allowing him to speak. So it is that public interest test. So unless there are any questions, might be at this stage, Chair, that you'd like Councillor Driscoll to speak and any questions to be put to him.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Driscoll, is there anything you want to say at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. It's just I've had a business interest in Holton Road for almost 40 years now, and mostly as a tenant. The last 10 years, then I've bought some property there and rent them out. I think I've got quite a good knowledge of town centre retail businesses, and at the moment, you know, as everyone's aware, the town centre businesses are all struggling, and I think I can help, and I think I've got enough expertise to contribute quite frequently and of benefit to the town centre. I do own 3 retail shops there. I'm the landlord. I'm a director of director of the company that owns the businesses, and I don't have anything to do with the running of the businesses, but I do feel I could contribute to the rejuvenation of the town centres. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I suppose the concern that people might have is that if there was a big Holton Road the council decided to improve it. I don't know how. I'm not sure I know the road itself, and to improve it greatly, you might benefit from it. I suppose that's the worry. Do you have? Do any members of the committee have any questions? I think Mr. Cuddy, Councillor Cuddy, your hand went up first, then Councillor Roberts.
Okay, yeah, well, being a town planner and interested in these matters, is certainly the case that someone who has a direct interest in Holton Road, and it's the principal shopping road for other members' information in Barry, and obviously it's a difficult situation really in the present circumstances in terms of rejuvenating. So I can see that Councillor Driscoll has, would be a valuable contributor to any discussion. The issue arises, I suppose, and I listened to what Debbie said. If the particular improvement landed directly...
Councillor Cuddy, can I interrupt? Can you put it in the form of a question at the moment to Councillor Driscoll, and then we will discuss it afterwards?
Well, I think if you allow me to finish, it's just that he has a contribution to make. Or, well, can I put that as the question? Will you make a? He's already said that. Yeah. And I'm saying to disentangle what Debbie said between being a valuable member in terms of discussion prior to a vote and a distinction when he is actually or would be allowed to vote. And those circumstances of voting, would he withdraw if a proposal related more directly than pedestrianisation or whatever, more directly to his premises, where he would have a very defined prejudicial interest?
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. I understand your concerns. If it is a concern of the committee, then I'm quite happy to just be allowed to speak at meetings and not vote. But I will point out that most of the 3 businesses are on long leases, and whether they do very well or poorly, it doesn't benefit me. They still pay the rent, so to speak. So, but yeah, I'm quite happy to withdraw from the vote. It's not a major issue. You usually find that everybody's on the same wavelength. With retail town centre shopping, they all want to see it well. So I'm quite happy to not vote if that's the committee's wish.
My suggestion was that if it was directly related to your premises, really. I mean, I think otherwise you should vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Driscoll, would you say that the benefits of your expertise and knowledge in matters relating to retail in Barry or various aspects of business in Barry outweighed the downside, as it were? And would you know if there was any? I mean, this application for dispensation will only run until the May 5th election next year. So is there anything in the pipeline which looks like it might actually affect your business from the council in terms of refurbishment or improvement of the area? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'll answer the last question first. I'm not aware of anything that would fundamentally affect Holton Road. The first question, I'm not conceited enough to think that I am the be-all and end-all of knowledge of Holton Road, but I do feel like I can put a a valuable input into aspects of building it back up, yes.
Good, thank you. Are there any more questions? No? All right. If Councillor Driscoll could now leave the meeting, we will now go on to discuss your application. And thank you very much firstly for attending and for your input.
Okay, thank you all, and thank you very much, Chair.
How do we know if he's left? I think one he's gone. Yes, one has gone. Right. Mrs. Tinsley, you've got your hand up.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'm quite uncomfortable with this application, I have to say. I'm grateful that Councillor Driscoll has considered speaking and not voting. That would be my preference. I think it is quite a difficult area. I do understand his desire to make the application, and I do wonder, given the topics that we're going to be moving on to, whether or not I am slightly biased in my opinion because of the material we're looking at later. So I'm being very open about that, but my opinion would be to speak, certainly to benefit from that expertise that he clearly has, but I'm uncomfortable about the voting.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if it helps you, that's my view as well. I think I don't accept his point that the value of the properties, I mean, the fact that they're on long leases, well, if he could sell the long leases if the property suddenly it was very valuable. If some, I don't know, some Waitrose or something came in next door, I don't know the area. So I think that's not a very good point. And my view would be that he could speak and vote, speak but not vote, rather. Does anybody want to comment? Mr. Watkins? I think you're still on mute, Mr. Watkins.
Should we confine our decision to paragraph F and not paragraph D? Paragraph F seems to cover the situation.
Yes, that sounds sensible, doesn't it?
And then I would agree with what's been said, to speak only.
The participation of the member in the business to which the interest relates is justified by the member's particular role or expertise.
Yes.
Okay, yes, that's good. Councillor Cuddy, I'm sorry I cut you short. I'm glad you were coming to a question. I wanted him to be the questions to be put there. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I would, you know, I don't wish to, I'd say he could vote depending on it's the particular circumstances and issue. Holton Road's a long road of shops, and there are lots of planning policies and things where his vote, you know, may be crucial or otherwise, but
is that practical to say, well, you can vote on parts of Holton Road?
It's an impractical question if you're just talking about a long space, which is about 1.5 miles long.
Councillor Robertson, I think you've got a comment.
Yeah, it's following on from what Councillor Cuddy has said, which I agree with. Could we get the advice of the monitoring officer on this one? Yep. Could the monitor officer explain the process by which Councillor Driscoll could withdraw if it was more specifically relating to his interests?
Yeah, I was also going to comment that, of course, the nature of the application presented by Councillor Driscoll is very broad, and he does refer to Holton Road and thereby in its entirety. But that's still, and regardless of the decision made by Standards Committee today, Councillor Driscoll, is aware that there's always the opportunity to approach myself or Vicky in my absence for guidance, in my capacity as monitoring officer, with regards to whether a personal prejudicial interest arises. And I can certainly, following this meeting and following the decision of the committee, clarify that, because it might be that there is a matter arising in Holton Road, and as Councillor Keddy has indicated, it is a very long road, and it might be at the far end, and it might be that in those circumstances that I would take a view that in fact that wouldn't constitute a personal and prejudicial interest. So if it does assist, that there is always that sort of additional layer of advice which is available to Councillor Driscoll. Hopefully that helps the committee.
Well, I'm not sure it does, because we would say, yes, you can speak and vote, but each time you've got to seek permission of or seek clarification from you. I think it's extra work for you, Debbie, to decide.
I think if it was the decision of the committee to speak and vote, that would be the end of the matter. You wouldn't need to seek clarification. No. If it was a case of you can speak, then yes, it would mean that if he did feel that he could vote and he didn't have a personal prejudicial interest, that he'd have the opportunity to liaise with me. But indeed, that is the case quite widely across the council anyway, that all members can liaise with me if they are in any doubt. So from an officer's perspective, it isn't an issue.
Right, thanks. Mr. Alexander? Thanks.
I'm quite concerned that dependent on specific circumstances, we may be nuancing the specific approach. I would prefer a simpler answer to this, in that Councillor Driscoll can speak if he feels it's appropriate, and I do understand his expertise in the area, but I would prefer to have a situation where he did not vote. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think he was happy. He would be happy with that, he said. Well, can I have, how many think that he should be allowed to speak and vote? Could you put your hands up, please? One. Mr. Alexander, what do you say to that? I can't see your face. Well, let's go on to those who think that he should be allowed just to speak. I'm in that camp. Yes. Right. So I think Councillor Robertson, I'm not sure which way you're voting on that, or.
Sorry, I put my virtual hand up for voting that he should be allowed to speak and vote, under the caveat that if it's on an issue which directly affects his properties in a prejudicial way, that he should declare that. Okay. But I'm quite happy to go along with the rest of the committee.
Yes, well, it's the two councillors think that he should speak and vote. I think the 5 of us independents think it should be speak only. Debbie, I think that means it should be speak only. Is that right? Even though it's not unanimous.
Yes, the decision is by majority. So yes, that would be carried.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is Councillor Burnett present?
Sorry, Chair, no, Councillor Burnett isn't present, but members may not have the opportunity to have looked at their emails last night, but I did send out 3 applications for dispensation. If any member hasn't received them, I can put it on screen. But if members have received them, it's a case of going through the applications as Councillor Burnett is due to speak on behalf of them.
Can I say to you all, I was a little concerned about accepting these at something like 5 o'clock last night, but I was assured that they were pretty straightforward. So because could be a long meeting, I did agree that they could be allowed in. Councillor Burnett seems very thorough and raises these issues because they do relate to her family. I can't see a problem, but does anybody see any objections to any of them? You're all shaking your head. Councillor Cuddy? No. So can we deal with all three as one, and is everybody happy that the three should be allowed? Good. Fine. Debbie, is that all right? Good. Thank you. Good. Okay. We now move on to item 5, which is observations at town and community council meetings. Who would like to open up as to who's been where? Mr. Alexander.
I'm happy to start, Chair, if you would find that helpful.
Yeah.
To say that on the 23rd of the 11th, so just a few evenings ago, I attended the meeting of Michael Stanley Pitt and Leckworth Community Council. I found it to be a purposeful and well-run meeting, and you know, I think I should express my thanks to the chair and the clerk for the courtesy that was extended to me. I joined it remotely using Starleaf, which is now not a platform that very many people use, and I did have some difficulty in hearing some of what was being said, but I suppose that's just a function of the fact that we are in a post-pandemic recovery situation. It wouldn't have been possible to have very many more people in that size of meeting room than the committee themselves, the council themselves. My one concern was that it proved quite difficult to actually get the Starleaf link for the meeting. The date for the meeting was changed at reasonably short notice, and fortunately I was able to accommodate that within my diary. But it proved quite difficult to get the link for the meeting, and Paula had to ask several times for that. And whilst I understand the fact that the clerk to the Community Council only works for a very limited number of hours each week, if I put myself in the position of a member of the public trying to get that link in order to obtain access to the meeting, then I think it would have been quite a hurdle for them. So it's not a comment in relation to the actual process of running the meeting, but I think there is somewhat of a difficulty for a member of the public in gaining access to that discussion. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Mrs. Howlett, you're on mute at the moment.
I wasn't actually going to comment on Councillor Alexander. I was going to offer myself to give the next report.
Yes, fine, fine. Okay? Yes, that's okay, yeah.
Mine was held in St Donat's on the 5th of October. So forgive me if I refer back to my notes because it was a while ago. Yeah. But similar to Mr. Alexander, we had problems as well. The meeting was held virtually through Zoom, and access to the meeting was provided through 3 separate emails, each lasting for half an hour. So every half an hour, you have to come back out and go back into the system again. In fairness to the meeting, it was very well coordinated in that when we came back into the meeting, the chair recapped on where we were and what we were doing. But like Mr. Alexander, it was very cumbersome and it was not flowing. So I actually spoke to Karen and suggested that maybe this is something they need to look at because I've never come across it before. I don't know if anyone else has. The rest of the meeting was lovely. It was really good. The chair was very competent in managing the meeting, ensured all the members were allowed to discuss. And when arriving at decisions, it was done collectively. The clerk was excellent. And there'd obviously been quite a lot of work done beforehand, which allowed the meeting to flow really well. and it was good for timekeeping. Two agenda items were raised by two items were brought up by the member, which weren't on the agenda, but they were dealt with very quickly as they were only for the purpose of updating, and that was very good. Members were courteous to each other, all members were actively involved in discussing the business, and they worked as a good group, and it was a really good meeting with the exception of the link, which I thought was very, very cumbersome.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody's got any comment and wants to raise questions on that. I assume not. Mr. Watkins, have you got? Yes, sorry, Mr. Robertson, your hand went up. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, on the previous Ronnie Alexander's account of the Mickleston one, I was present at that meeting as liaison with the Vale Council, between the Community Council and the Vale Council, and I think I should make it clear. I don't think Mr. Alexander made it clear. It was a hybrid meeting, and it's only the second hybrid meeting we've had. And I understand what he's saying about the difficulty of accessing via the platform. But would you like me to actually bring that up with the clerk in Mickleston and Leckwith, or will you be doing that yourselves? Thank you.
Vicky, could you answer that one? Oh, you're not on. Debbie, the question was, it was the first hybrid meeting, I think, from Councillor Robertson mentioned. Is that something that
second hybrid, Chair,
that he should take up, or that we as a committee or via you should take up with them?
I'm more than happy to take that issue up. In fact, I did have my 6 monthly monitoring officer meeting yesterday with all of the clerks to town and community councils. And we did have a general discussion about the points that had been raised. And I was just seeking clarification. That's why I went offline. I was just seeking clarification whether the relevant clerk did attend, because of course there are 26 town and community councils in the Vale, and I did lose track because there were apologies offered. And I think just looking to Karen, that relevant clerk didn't join my meeting yesterday. So certainly we always share the comments with each of the clerks and chairman of the community councils following the discussion at the Standards Committee. So it will be taken up directly. So yes, we'll most definitely share that. Can I also just say, and just going back to the comment that was made by Mrs. Hallett, and about the 30-minute chunks, shall I say, of the meeting with Welsh St Donat's Community Council. That was discussed at the monitoring officer meeting yesterday, and again, I don't think the clerk was in attendance, but it was a really useful discussion. And what did become clear is that I think it is with the particular software provider that if the meetings are chunked into 30 minutes, there's no cost. And I think the Community Council were being very frugal and were taking the benefit of there being a nil cost. And I suppose they should be admired for being creative. But the discussion we had at the monitoring officer meeting, which will be shared, is that the cost actually of the software licenses is very reasonable. I think one of the clerks shared with the group that it is in the region of about £100, and what will be shared with the relevant clerk and chairman is that the savings from travelling expenses probably will more than outweigh the cost of the software license. So we will be sharing that also with the relevant community council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cuddy, you've got your hand up. Thank you. Right,
Mr. I had my hand up.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's a problem for with my knowledge of the whole sector across Wales. It's it's a problem everywhere, and especially for small councils to provide hybrid facilities, really. And if we're going to do anything, it's better that there be a collective sort of response to this rather than sort of ad hoc responses on different platforms. My own council, Penarth, had difficulty, and I think it contributed quite a lot of money to a particular platform. It didn't turn out well in its first attempt. So it's something which I think a collective decision about is worth pursuing, and obviously Debbie is onto it to some extent, but. It's an issue, I think, which the government should share as well. Partly, they put it in legislation, and for small councils, it is a big problem. And all credit to the council who used the half-hour system, really. But it's something I think which government itself should be joined into. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Do you want to comment, or are you going to? It's a fresh report, is it?
Yes.
Yes, I'll hold you back for a moment. Mr. Alexander, do you want to comment?
Only that I wish to make it clear in relation to the meeting that I attended that I'm in no way critical of the meeting itself. I thought it was very efficient and very well run. The point that I'm reflecting on really is the difficulty that a member of the public might have in gaining access to that discussion. And I do agree with the point that Councillor Cuddy's just made about the need to have some commonality of approach. Thank you.
Well, I think that's very interesting. I think that's very good. Mrs. Hallett, did you want to comment?
I was just supporting what Mr. Alexander was saying, that the Welsh St. Donna's meeting was run very, very well. And in fact, every half an hour break, there was a recap as to where we were on the agenda. So no way am I criticising the meeting, just the way and the access for the member of the public to get into the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Watkins.
Yes, I attended Penllyn Council meeting on the 4th of October. This was a live meeting. The council meets at Llansanor Community Hall. I don't know if members know this area, but it's in city. It's a remote spot. And clearly this is a council that doesn't expect or anticipate members of the public to attend. The seating was very informal. There were no name badges or anything. The meeting was very well conducted. They got through the agenda quite quickly. I discussed with the clerk and the chairman the attendance of the public. And clearly, if members of the public want to attend, they will usually contact the council in advance. If members of the public did attend, there was plenty of room for them to sit and they would be comfortably accommodated there. The clerk expressed concern about the matters that have already been raised, the legislation that requires the provision for remote attendance, and he raised the question of costs, and he also raised the question of perhaps councils having to move the venue of their meetings to a place where there was internet connections. I don't know whether that's relevant, but if there's a poor signal where the meeting is, then it's going to frustrate people attending remotely. That's all I have to say about that, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Does anybody want to comment on that? It does seem to defeat the object if they all have their meeting, say, in Barry or something, for locals to travel to that. It's a problem, isn't it, if there's no good Wi-Fi? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I also attended St. Donat's on the 6th of October. That was a live meeting. The council meets at Atlantic College. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the meeting room, the Arts Centre, Atlantic College. I arrived at the campus entrance at 6:30. I was photographed and given a visitor's pass. I then made my way to the Arts Centre. In the meeting room in the Arts Centre, where I expected the meeting to be held, there were two students practicing music. They knew nothing about the meeting. In another part of the centre, there was a pianist and a singer practicing, the singer offered to take me to the main hall of the college where the meeting might be held. It wasn't being held there. So I was now at a loss of what to do. So I was making my way back to my car, in fact, when I bumped into the person who was named on my pass as my contact. And he took me to the meeting. The meeting was, I would say, about half a mile from the college entrance. So getting to the meeting would be very difficult. It was very difficult by car, but it would be quite very difficult for pedestrians. I arrived at the meeting at 7:15. The room was very small, certainly not large enough to accommodate sizable members of the public. The meeting was very well conducted, very amicable. They got through the work, quite a long agenda. They got through it quite quickly. I've no reservations about the conduct of the meeting. My concern is members of the public wishing to attend, because, as I said, the meeting is held on the college campus. So the college controls who enters the campus. And it seemed to me that you could have a problem if the college were not allowing somebody in who wished to attend the meeting. I don't quite know how that's resolved. That's probably an academic point, but it did occur to me there could be difficulties.
I think that's a very good and practical point. I'll come on to a meeting I went to when 6 members of the public who were complaining about planning permission attended, and they were pretty hostile. So if they wanted to attend your meeting, it would have been difficult. Debbie, do you have some comments?
Yes, thank you. Just to mention, and this was dealt with in very generic terms, so not naming specific community councils yesterday at the monitoring officer meeting, but I did share this issue about the independent member and therefore possibly members of the public not being able to reach a meeting for the start of the scheduled meeting. And as I say, in very general terms, referred to the incident that you experienced. Following the meeting, I did have an email from the relevant clerk who was mortified and assumed it must have been her community council meeting, and she was profusely apologetic. Certainly we'll follow up with the points concerning members of the public and gaining access, but what she did assure me is that, that there appears to have been a breakdown in communication, and the arrangements that she'd put in place for some unknown reason did fail, but she was profusely apologetic and wanted me to relay those apologies on to yourself. So yes, but certainly we'll take on board and relay to the clerk and the chairman the issues, including the wider issues about access to the public.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to comment on that? No? Okay, well, I attended St Athan Community Council on the 2nd of November. This was a live meeting. It was generally very well conducted. The layout wasn't very good. The shape of the room was, if you like, T-shaped, where the councillors sat on the horizontal and we were at the other end of the room. So whilst they had name badges there, or yes, their names there, we couldn't see them. It wasn't particularly well lit, but it was well held. There was, as I was indicating, quite a few members of the public attended and were very hostile about planning, about a planning issue. And there's clearly a lot of issues in St Athan about potential planning, and it was getting very personal. The chairman handled it very, very well indeed, explaining that the limited scope that the community council could take at this stage. They were all given their say. The language was pretty choice at times, but it was very well held, very well handled. That took about 30 minutes of the meeting. They all left satisfied that they'd had their say. So that was very, very good. However, later there was an issue about the pay and conditions of work of the clerk, and he said he asked if he should leave the room, but the chairman said no need, you can stay. I think the situation is that they all get on very well. I thought that decision was wrong, because I thought if any councillor wanted to criticise or comment on the clerk's work, it would have been impossible because he would have been there. And they then sort of opened up a discussion. Well, how many hours do you think you want to work? What days, etc., etc. What's the rate of pay? Should it be backdated to May? Should this be happened? Should this be happening, etc., etc.? And I just thought that was wrong. And my comment is that it should have been much better if there had been a finance group or a subgroup had dealt with this and had met him and come to an agreement, hopefully, and then just reported it to the council. I think I was the only member of the public there, but at that stage, yes, I was, but it just seemed wrong. But subject to that, it was very well held. Right. Does anybody want to comment on that or anything else? No? Yes. Debbie, sorry.
Thank you. Just to mention, it was quite timely that I had the monitoring officer and clerks meeting yesterday. This particular point was raised. So as you're aware, I do use the opportunity to have some elements of training in that meeting, and this was raised, and I highlighted the fact that the clerk had a personal interest in the matter, and that the clerk should have withdrawn, and that my advice was that these matters be raised with the chairman in advance of the meeting, and for the clerk to advise that he or she would be withdrawing. It isn't a matter for discussion in the presence of the clerk. Clearly has a personal interest, and I'm pleased to say that the clerks who attended my meeting yesterday all concurred with that. So it was timely to have that opportunity to raise that particular concern, and indeed we'll be raising it directly with St Athens Clerk and Community Council's Chair.
Good, thank you. Well, I think our visits, I think they're very beneficial, because there are lots of lessons to be learned by various people, by various councils, and even if they're not specific, they will learn from other the experiences of other councillors. I think that completes now all the yes, Mrs. Hallett.
Chair, can I just ask Debbie, how are we received? How are we seen by the councillors? Do they welcome us, or do they see us our friend, or as a complainant, or how are we viewed?
The feedback I get is it's welcomed. These meetings are welcomed. As you know, when the pro forma that you work to when you're making your observations was shared in advance with the clerks and with the chairman, so that there's no element of surprise. And indeed, they did feed into that process, because they do see it as an extra element of support, because I think, certainly as you'd appreciate, it is quite a lonely place to be a clerk of a community council. You know, there aren't, in some of these community councils, the clerk is the only member of staff. So yes, very, very much appreciated. And I think the way that we then follow up and provide that generic advice from across the 26 town and community councils, it is very much appreciated. So yeah, all very positive.
Good.
Good. As I say, I think that completes Karen, am I correct? We've now been round all the councils.
Yes, we have.
Yes. The next exercise is to draw up a document to see what we've learnt from that. Do you think there's a chance that could be for the next meeting, or should we wait for March? What?
It's my intention to bring it to you in January, Chair. But obviously I will be discussing that with you and the monitoring officer. It's my intention to do it for January, but otherwise it will be March. Thanks.
Right. I think that will be an interesting exercise. And then the next question is whether we continue with this until May or whether we start again in May. Debbie, do you have any views on that?
Certainly, it's a matter for the committee. I think there are, when we carry out the review, there are maybe a number, maybe just a handful of community councils where I think, it would be beneficial to focus the resource. We're coming on later on in the agenda to the matter concerning Sully and Lavenock Community Council, and I think that is certainly one where I'd appreciate, a focus of attention.
Okay. Well, subject to your agreement, I think we'll get together here and with Debbie and Karen and Vicky and see if there are any community councils that should be viewed until May, and then we can be told about them, and hopefully some of us can go, or one each time, to see those councils in action. And then in May, presumably, we will start the process again when there are other elections. Okay, Mr. Watkins, do you want to comment? Your hand is up.
Sorry, no. Let me get my hand down then.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Good. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the independent review of ethical standards framework in Wales. Debbie, would you want to speak to this, please?
Yes, thank you. Well, as you'll see, it's a very comprehensive report, and I've attached Richard Penn's paper. So as you'll see, this is the first phase of an independent review of the ethical standards framework for local government, which has been commissioned by Welsh Government with the intention that any proposed changes will be introduced in advance of the May 22 local elections. So Richard Penn is the independent consultant was commissioned to undertake the review, and as I've indicated, it's the first stage of that process. The second, and his recommendations have been submitted to Welsh Government. The second phase will involve working with partners and stakeholders to deliver the change. As you'll see from the paper, there are a number of recommendations. I will run through those, some of which would require legislative changes, some would require changes to the model code of conduct, so quite a significant piece of work. I thought it would be a benefit for you to see the report in its entirety, so it's attached as an appendix to the paper. You'll note that the Chair of Standards Committee, myself and Victoria Davidson, the Deputy Monitoring Officer, had the opportunity to meet with Richard Penn, and we had quite an in-depth discussion about general issues, but also specific issues in respect of the Vale of Glamorgan, both at a principal council level and also town and community council level. So I was pleased to have that opportunity. The paper from Richard Penn sets out his recommendations at pages 42 to 52, and within the body of the report I've summarised at paragraph 2.4 the key elements of those recommendations. Happy to take members through that should you wish, but otherwise the summary of the recommendations are in paragraph 2.4 of my paper.
Thank you. I don't think that's necessary. I'm conscious that we've got a fairly long meeting to get through today. I won't stop any discussion, but if anybody wants to briefly comment, my comment is that I was disappointed that at page 49, with interim case tribunals, the point that we raised on the suspension or the interim suspension of councillors, we raised the specific issue we have in the Vale and thought we needed a strong view on that, and it, frankly, I don't think it's very strong, because it says where it appears to the interim case tribunal that A, B, and then C, and that it is in the public interest to suspend or partially suspend the accused member immediately for the protection of members of the public, to maintain public confidence in local government, to uphold proper standards of conduct and behaviour, or to enable the completion of the Ombudsman's investigation. That, I think, is a bit too vague. It would have been much better that if they'd said, well, if somebody is charged with an offence punishable by whatever period, a year in prison, 3 years, 5 years, then they would be automatically suspended. Would have dealt with the issue much quicker than that. But that's just my personal comment. Now, if anybody would like to comment on the report, Debbie, your hand went up.
Thank you. On the back of that, and it might be that the committee wished to submit those comments to Richard Penn, Welsh Government, so that it can be factored into this first phase of the consultation. But I think also on the back of that, on the same page, page 49, it does refer to the a suspension, an interim suspension, that it would be only for 6 months, but it would be possible for that to be renewed up to 3 times in total, so 18 months in total. And I think being mindful of the timescale for matters of the nature that we're talking about to come before the court for trial, I think the timescale may need to be reflected upon, whether 18 months is sufficient, because you could find a situation that if a matter doesn't come for trial in that period, that you run out of time. So it's just being mindful of that timescale with the type of matters that we're concerned with. So that might be worth also flagging up on the back of the point that you've taken us through.
I think that's a very good point, and I'd agree to that. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You might consider I'm being naive here, but I thought that in this country, people are innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, they are. That's right. If it was employment, they would be suspended. If, for example, a school teacher was charged with interfering with children, I don't think most people would be happy for them to be going back teaching. Yes, Debbie, do you want to?
Yeah, just to highlight, and it's covered off in Richard Penn's paper about the other scenarios where interim suspensions apply. So he refers to the medical practitioners tribunal, and I think it's important to highlight that an interim suspension in these circumstances is a neutral act, and I think it should be viewed in the light of an employment scenario, and I think that's where the medical practitioners scenario is obviously based. That pending the hearing of a matter that would fall within the category envisaged within page 49, that it's an interim suspension, neutral act to allow due process to be followed. So I think it's important, rightly so, to highlight that key point.
Okay, I don't want to go on the specific. Does anybody else want to raise any other matters concerning the report? Councillor Cuddy. You're on mute at the moment. Thank you.
Just a general comment related to community councils. It always annoys me slightly that it's pointed out in a number of places how many complaints and referrals there have been, but they never put in any part of the report, which I think they should, the context, which is that there are 735 community and town councils in Wales, and that often complaints refer to one council, repeat complaints or associated complaints. It seems to me that that background should always be in the report, or certainly should be in this report, as it appears though, there are 8, you can imagine that it's a statistical nothingness, the number of complaints in relation to 8,000 councillors, and by and large they don't do a bad job. That annoys me slightly. The other issue is an issue of sanctions in general. You've been talking about the interim suspension and related, but I don't know where the actual sanctions, which are quite, in my view, light, 1 month, 3 months, whatever, where they come from in the first instance. And I think his report, when it goes to sanctions, just refers to strengthening in relation to other legislation in England, to the review panel can make, and there may be some change there. It seems to me there should be some change in terms of the penalties which a standards committee can award, if that's the right term. And there's also the issue of timetable, the length of time these things take, and the and as is highlighted this in our former discussion, that it's a nugatory sanction in the end if the person stopped to be a councillor. So that sort of thing. They're my general comments anyway.
Thanks. Yes, I think that those are well made. Right. Anybody else? Debbie, do you want to comment?
All I was going to say, and it is tucked away, and I've been flicking through the Richard Penn paper as we've been speaking, and I've failed to find the part, but there is mention to the 735 town and community councils across Wales, but it is in the context of local dispute resolution procedures. But the context is that in his report he acknowledges that there are in some areas local dispute resolution procedures. Only 70 out of the 735 have such a procedure, and I think it should be acknowledged that this committee did push for each of the town and community councils in the Vale to have a local dispute resolution procedure, and I think all bar one, possibly two, did adopt that approach. So that is positive. Whether they're using them, though, is the point, isn't it? I think that would be an interesting piece of work, and certainly Richard Penn is alluding to the fact that, and the Ombudsman, that that process does appear to be bypassed, which I think is an issue.
Good, thank you. So subject to saying that this is noted, does anybody else want to comment? No, good, I'll take your silence as meaning no. Thank you very much. We'll keep our eye on that, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. Sorry? Yes, yes, okay. The next item on the agenda is Audit Wales report, inadequacies in governance and financial management, and in particular the Sully and Levenok Community Council. Councillor Marnie has joined us, I see, who've been here sitting patiently. I'm going to invite you to speak if you want to, Councillor Marnie, but first I'm going to ask Debbie to give the background to this and a development since that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So I'll speak very, very briefly. I've attached a copy of the report, which is in the public domain, from Audit Wales. And so that is before you. It is a report going back to the audit year 2018-2019. Within the report, Audit Wales do acknowledge that the Community Council have appointed a permanent clerk in September 2020, so that's been acknowledged. I have written to the Executive Director, Anne-Marie Harkin, the author of the report, also to highlight work of this committee. I will share that letter with members of the committee following the meeting so that you have that. But just to give you an overview, what I have referred to in that letter is that the Standards Committee have developed the programme of attending town and community council meetings, as we've covered off as one of our standard items early on in the agenda. I've referred to the pro forma that is used and the feedback given to clerks and chairmen. I've also highlighted the 6 monthly monitoring officer meetings which are held to share that generic advice from the Standards Committee and comments, to discuss topical issues, areas of concern, and to provide an opportunity for clerks to network and learn from the experience of their peers, and that these meetings with the clerks supplement the one-to-one discussions that are held with individual clerks as the need arises, and the training that is provided by the Council on Members' Code of Conduct matters as agreed with this committee. I've also highlighted in that letter that I have met, and the Chair of Standards Committee has also been involved previously in meetings with the clerk, chairman and vice chairman of the Town and Community Council, and that this is a regular practice with this particular community council, and there is ongoing support provided outside such meetings. So I thought it was important to provide a fuller picture to Audit Wales with regards to the efforts which are made by this committee and myself with Selling Latvanon Community Council. As you'll appreciate from the report of the Audit Wales, primarily their focus is one of finance. There are 9 recommendations which are set out in their paper, page 7 through to page 8. So the recommendations are there. I'm bringing this particularly to Standards Committee attention because of one of the recommendations reading member conduct must improve and the council should seek external assistance, including member training, to ensure council meetings are conducted in an orderly and professional manner. The recommendations from Audit Wales do require the Community Council to consider the report, and I know my colleague Karen Bowen has been checking the website of the Community Council to see whether that has taken place, and also I understand she has attempted to liaise with the clerk to get clarification for the purpose of today's meeting. So I will ask Karen to also comment. But you'll see from the recommendations the further proposals going forward are also to hold a further meeting with the clerk so that there can be further discussion, and the chairman and the vice chairman. So just to assure the committee that the work that we do behind the scenes will certainly continue, but I think it's important for the committee to have that opportunity to discuss this matter.
Thank you very much. Yes, Debbie and I did discuss how we responded to this. We sat on it for a while, not to give an off-the-cuff reaction, and then we had a couple of draft letters, and I think it's fair to say that my my suggested letter would have been slightly more defensive or offensive, but she quite correctly pointed out that we shouldn't adopt that line. Councillor Marnie, do you want to speak to the meeting?
Yes, if that's okay. Would that be okay to go ahead?
Yes, I think we just about here. You can.
Is that better for you?
It's better for me. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Yes. Thank you. The reason I've asked for to address the committee here is that I have concerns, having watched the meeting of the Sully and Lavenock Community Council meeting just a week or so to discuss this report themselves. I could sit here until next week detailing problems within this council, historic problems that would have each and every one of you shaking your heads in disbelief. I won't do that because not only would we be here till next week, we of course are discussing the audit matter here. One thing I would say though, before in dismissing me, giving a whole liturgy of what's gone on at this council here and how badly it's run and the behaviour of members, and this is anecdotal, of course, from myself. Let me put it to you that every single person, without exception, in the village and ward that speaks to me on this subject would scrap Sully and Lavenock Community Council tomorrow. That's quite a damning assessment of something that should be an asset for this village. Other community councils work together with the people, work together with their elected members, and do positive things for the village. But that, okay, you have to take it as anecdotal. I'm sure you'll agree it's a pretty damning assessment. This audit report has featured, obviously, on financial matters and administrative matters. But the actual stuff that's been going on at this council, as I say, I could write a book. I'll leave that there. Suffice to say, whenever you ring up the Vale on anything to do with Sully Community Council, whatever department you ring up, there's a long groan down the phone from whichever answers the phone when the name of Sully Community Council is mentioned. It's an embarrassment to the village. And in the past, myself and Bob Penrose have actually talked out members of the public from raising the petition or whatever to scrap this council. But I must confess, I'm virtually on the verge that it needs to go now unless it can be reformed. I am aware that there are a few new members on there, and of course we have the elections coming up in May. That hopefully this will change. Although of course there are a good few number of the old guards are still on there. But the reason I've asked to speak to you today is my concern. I mentioned there was a meeting just a week or two ago, CK Barrow in there, by Sully Community Council to discuss this. And I must confess, I think the mildest word I can say, I was disappointed by their attitudes and the constant, so we would say, almost backclapping, as in, oh, we're doing much better now, we've sorted this out. But I was particularly concerned with the constant, let's put everything in the past now, let's not identify people, let's move on together as a team, you know, this sort of stuff. Well, no. When I read this report, I don't know, I don't wish to be offensive, but if you guys have read this report word by word as I have, it is the most damning report of anything I've ever said. And the main thing that I get from this is the fact that even after all this time and all the stuff they did incorrectly and is described as unlawful, which I find quite unbelievable, is that the auditor has basically mentioned, these are my paraphrases, so how he's almost obstructed in his tasks, misled, and in fact at the very end of it, I think he's put 14 sections there, and I think about 8 or 9 of them has specifically mentioned how his findings were totally opposite of how they were presented by whoever he was dealing with within the council. Now this is where I'm totally appalled and concerned that going on, that this council, from their attitude in their meeting the other day, let's put it all behind us and start again. No. Let's identify who has then been obstruction, the auditor for a start, who's been giving him false information, because this is indicative of the stuff that's been going on. You know, financial matters, they don't even have a clue. I've attended meetings for years and years. They haven't got a clue who's even left in their fields. Descriptions of the chairman saying, "Oh, bloke wandered in and handed me 65 quid the other day." I said, "What's this for?" And folks said, "Well, we hired a room off you." And this is public money. This is the taxpayers' money that needs to be spent on facilities services in the local Surrey Community Council that, quite frankly, as the auditor has identified, they haven't got a clue what's going on, and I don't see anything improving from what I saw from the Surrey Lavernot Community Council meeting the other day. We have mentions of unlawful acts. Well, shouldn't action be taken by whoever was responsible for that? We have the sacking of the clerk, which went on for 2 years, or the suspension, I should say. They have constantly, as a council, refused, despite scores of requests from members of the public at their meetings, how much this has cost so far. Conservative estimate of £50,000-60,000. This is from a community council with an income of about £110,000, and it's still ongoing. They've refused to reveal, to this day. We found out off the Auditor General, I didn't actually know this until I read his report, that they're supposed to post a notice telling the public they can come in and inspect their accounts every year. I mean, is that unlawful? And should whoever's been doing that be up in front of somebody or reported to somebody? Should the police be involved in this? So we still have no knowledge of how much this disastrous dealing as a former clerk, who unfortunately died now, has cost the community. They've refused time after time after time. And yet we find out that the public were allowed to go in and see these accounts, but weren't told, no notice was given. So I'll be kind of repeating myself now. The whole council is an embarrassment to the village. It's a disaster. And as I say, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that report, you will never see a more damning report of anything in time. Even after being investigated, they apparently, from the chap who carried out the audit, they were hiding, well, not hiding stuff, but not helping him, not cooperating, giving him stuff information that he had to find out. This is indicative of this council. There's been some terrible things, quotes, none of the 3 quotes, not advertising in the paper when it's been over a certain amount. This has just been going on for ages. And this is my concern, that from what I saw the other day, there seems to be, we're doing much better now, we've put things in process. No, let's not identify people, let's not harangue people, let's go on forward. I think, does anybody have to be reported to the police or other authorities over this, quite frankly? I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you've expressed your views very well and very strongly, and if we didn't have an idea of what was going on, we certainly did. We do now. Councillor Robertson, your hand's up. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask Councillor Marnie a question. Basically, first of all, how would you fix this problem? This is obviously a problem which has been going on. We've all been aware of it for a number of years. What is your fix? And I can't understand if the community as a whole, I'm not talking about the community council, but as community as a whole, are so averse to what is going on in their community council and fed up with it, as you indicate. Why at a point in time at an election the solution couldn't be found by actually electing members who the community do feel will represent them in a satisfactory way? Thank you, Chair.
Well, that last question is obviously a question for individuals themselves to answer. I mean, the bottom line is you can only vote for who stands, doesn't it? I mean, most people get on with their lives, don't they? They don't get involved with politics or even local politics or anything like that. As I say, we have several new people who have joined after previous resignations. Perhaps haven't had a chance to get to grips with the situation. Their performance will be judged on their performance. But as I say, this is why I know I repeat myself here, that I was rather concerned listening to comments from them, conciliatory comments to those who've been there for 20, 30 years even, when I think people should be identified. Surely they should be reported if there's been obstruction of the Auditor General. I mean, I've had them, shall we say, censured by the health and safety for so many things in the past. Myself and others have just constantly, Debbie Miles would back this up, been in touch with the Vale of Glamorgan about the behaviours of them, and they just seem to plough on and whatever. You only have to go on the internet. I suggest, well, I don't say suggest. Why not go on the internet when you get home and just put in Tully and Levenhulme Community Council, you'll see us going back 25 years, and you will read with disbelief. And I said, what I could tell you, and I read out what I could tell you, that I have advertised in the past, and it's the sheer frustration. I'll give you just a very quick example here. Okay, very quick example.
Very quick, yes, please.
Okay, 2 very brief incidents. I was so concerned, I had the Vale Health and Safety Officer come in, and this was after myself and Bob Penrose found bare electric wires from a damaged cable in the toy box of the local playgroup in the Jubilee Hall, 6 days after it had been reported to the clerk. I had the Vale Health and Safety people in, check in to find out a dangerous gas water heater with all the flue disconnected and all the rest of it, which as a gas engineer can cause carbon monoxide poisoning after they failed to have it checked, as you must have with a certificate every year. You'll know that possibly in your own homes or maybe rented accommodation. Do you know what? Their reaction was to actually promote the clerk, give him more hours, more pay, and officially title him, this is the guy who's responsible, as their health and safety officer. And this is the sort of thing they've gone on, or this is the sort of behaviour, well, that's just a tiny little fraction of it. So my point is, should anybody be identified and reported to higher authorities and action taken for what's even the Auditor General, for blocking what they were trying to do? Not the Auditor General, the Audit Office, I should say.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. I think it's been very helpful. If we could turn to the recommendations, the first recommendation is that the Standard Committee notes and considers the contents of the Audit Wales report. Well, we've done that. If I can skip to 3, it's the intention of the monitoring officer to raise the matter at the monitoring officer's meeting with the clerks of the Community Council on the 24th of November be noted, and a copy of the report be emailed to all clerks of Town and Community Council in the Vale of Glamorgan for information. I think that was it yesterday?
It was.
Yes, perhaps you could take over there, Debbie.
Yes, thank you. This was put on the agenda for yesterday's meeting, and indeed the clerk to the Surrey and Levenhulme Community Council attended that meeting, certainly for the opening part, but he didn't actually comment on this particular matter. But it was put on the agenda, and it was put on the agenda so that other town and community councils were cited on the matter and could see and learn from this particular experience. So that has been actioned. There's one other point that I'd also like to raise is at the end of in fact it's before it goes into the attachments, it's page 9 of the Audit Wales report. There is a requirement in the next step section at point 29, which requires the council will need to prepare written response and agree the wording of that response with me. So that's the executive director of the audit services, before publishing its response in a local newspaper. So this is one of the things we're trying to ascertain, to see at what stage the Community Council have reached with regards to meeting the requirements of Audit Wales. I mean, certainly, I know my colleague Karen Bone is going to provide the verbal update that we have indicated we were going to provide in the body of the report. The other point, just to add, appreciate the comments from Councillor Marnie, and indeed we have had a number of discussions over the years, and I think it's fair to say that a number of the points that Councillor Marnie has highlighted will certainly be on the agenda for the discussion, which is obviously recommended in item 2 of this report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robertson, I'm aware you've got your hand up, but can I ask Karen just to comment? She's got comment to make.
Thanks, Chair. Just to let everybody know that I did contact the Community Council because I looked at their website and the information wasn't as easily accessible on the website as to what meeting this item had been discussed at. Although I have had assurance from the clerk now that it was discussed on the 9th of November. A reply to that report has already been sent to the Audit Office in the email he sent me this week, but he was just waiting for them to agree the reply in order that it can be published in the press. However, having looked at the website, I will do a note for the chair and the monitoring officer when they visit, because there were some issues in relation to how that agenda is provided on the website, and it didn't indicate at that point what time or where the meeting was to take place. So I'll do a note that can be taken up as well. That's just a quick overview of the information I've had this week.
Thank you. And then the second recommendation is that arrangements will be made for the chair of the Standards Committee and the monitoring officer to meet with the chair, vice chair and clerk of Sully and Avonmouth Community Council to discuss matters. I'm certainly happy to do that. Where are we on that, Debbie? When's that likely to take place?
I haven't approached the Community Council at this stage, obviously waiting for the discussion and agreement of the Standards Committee on that point. But immediately following this meeting, those arrangements or contact will be made with the Community Council to put those arrangements in place.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll be asking if you approve of that. Councillor Robertson, you've had your hand up. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As a last resort, I could be wrong here. I'll ask the monitoring officer. Isn't it possible for a community to actually dissolve their community council? I believe this was done in Roos some time ago.
Yes, indeed it is. And over the years, I have been approached and asked to provide that advice, and indeed that advice has been given via the electoral services team about the mechanism and the administrative steps required, albeit the advice has been sought on a number of occasions. That has not been taken forward.
Thank you. I think as a Standards Committee we've got a duty to keep our eye on this council. Do you agree that Debbie and I should make arrangements to meet with the chair, vice chair and clerk to try and pressurize them, see what's being done and how they can improve? Absolutely. Right, thank you. So we'll arrange for that, Debbie, and hopefully report back to you at the next meeting. Subject to that, is there anything anybody else wants to comment on? No. Thank you, Councillor Marnie. I mean, you can stay if you like, but presumably you've had your say, and if you want to leave the meeting, that's fine. But thank you very much for your input. It's good to see that somebody locally is taking an interest. Thanks very much. So we'll then move on to correspondence with the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. Debbie?
Yes, thank you. This is my standard Part 1 report. As you'll appreciate, I normally would move into Part 2 because of the confidential nature of such correspondence. So the agenda item at agenda item 8 is for noting, and then we'll move in after you've dealt with agenda item 9 into Part 2, and I'll debrief the committee.
Right. Now we move on to 9, which is a report relating to a complaint against Councillor A in respect of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and ex-Town Council. Vicky here, as Deputy Monitoring Officer, will give a short report.
Chair, I think Councillor Robertson has got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Robertson.
Chair, sorry about this. Would it be possible for us to have a comfort break for 5 minutes?
Yes. Are you all right to just wait for the end of this and then we'll move to Part 2?
Absolutely. It's actually coffee I need.
Yes, that's okay. All right, we'll deal with this. And there are no emergency items, so then we'll have a break. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that I bring to Standards Committee. There is a linked Part 2 report, but this matter relates to a complaint against Councillor A in respect of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Town Council X. The report relates to a complaint that the member has breached the Members' Code of Conduct. The Public Service Ombudsman for Wales has investigated the complaint, as they're entitled to do by law under Section 69 of the Local Government Act 2000, and has made findings and has referred the matter to the Council's Deputy Monitoring Officer in this case to be considered by the Standards Committee. So this report, agenda item 9, is for noting, and I will deal with it under Part 2.
Thank you very much. As I say, I don't think there are any urgent items. We've dealt with the applications. No. Good. So we'll now move to Part 2, but we'll use this opportunity of having a short break. It's about 25 to 12. Can we meet at quarter to 12? I think it's probably easiest if you just leave the room and go mute and come back rather than signing in again.
Yes.
All right.
Chair,
yes.
Chair, can I mention, for the purposes of the members of the public who are viewing this item, that the committee have agreed to move into Part 2. So when we return, this meeting will not be publicly displayed on the live stream.
Thank you.
So that allows my officers then behind the scenes to make sure that the meeting is only open to those members of the meeting.
Thank you for reminding me for that. Debbie?
And can I just very briefly mention, for the purposes of the minutes, that I left the room when agenda item 9 was being discussed.
Yes. Thank you. It was noted as well. Thanks very much. Okay, see you at quarter to